Yo, Kpaceguy here. Welcome back to the channel, YouTube. Welcome back to episode 9 of 7 Reasons Why. This is 7 things you didn't know about speaker wire. Stay tuned. Alright guys, so we're going to start from 7 and go down to number 1. No particular order, but we're going to go through all 7 things that you didn't know about speaker wire. So the 7th thing that you didn't know about speaker wire is the length, and that it matters a lot. Now when you're getting into speaker wire, you have to set your speakers where you want them to be so that you know how much wire you should run. But the more wire you run, the more problems you're going to end up having. Let me explain why. So when you run a lot of wire, you're affecting the impedance, the resistance within that wire. So if you see a speaker that has 8 ohms rating and you run that wire, the longer the wire, the more resistance you're gonna have to that speaker. You wanna shorten the wire as much as you can to keep the same resistance. When you have a left speaker and a right speaker, it's optimal to try to run the same length of wire because you want to send the same amount of power to each speaker. So if I have a left speaker at 12 feet and a right speaker at 13 feet, you're going to send more power to that left speaker because it's a shorter distance than the right speaker. How much difference? Not a lot, but there is a difference, so it should be noted. Also, the more wire you run, the bigger gauge wire you're going to want to run. The bigger the gauge, the more power that can pass through that wire. So when you're getting speaker wire or you're looking to upgrade your system, definitely make a note of your wire and make sure you're running optimal wire. You need a pretty good gauge to run a long distance and need a pretty good gauge to run a lot of power. The 6th thing you didn't know about your speaker wire is going to be the wire itself and what it's made out of. Most wire is made out of copper because copper is probably the least expensive to use. There's silver and then there's gold, but of course those are going to be more expensive. So using copper is cost effective, but there's one main issue with copper. It's oxidized. Copper oxidized. So you're going to want to look for a wire that does not have any oxidization. You don't want any of that. If you go look on your speaker wire, you'll see non-oxidized in their description. If you don't see that, look somewhere else. Oxygen free. You want to have that taken completely out of your wire. What that does to your wire is it adds a barrier between your amplifier and your speakers, and in return it causes a less strengthening of a connection. You lose a little bit of power, you don't have a good connection. So when you're looking for speaker wire, make sure you find something that has it's oxygen free. Definitely find something oxygen free so you can get all your current from your amplifier to your speaker that your speaker deserves. Now the 5th thing on this list is going to be terminals, speaker terminals. Whether you're using banana plugs or bare wire, if you're using spring clips or you're using the twist that has banana plugs, the twist on your back of your receivers, those things play a part in your connection. And they play a really good part. When you're going through your receiver and you want to plug in things, unplug things, when you want to move your speakers from one side of the room to another, it's much easier to have banana plugs that most people commonly use now to just insert and take out your plugs when you want to move them or you want to switch them out. It's super simple, but not only is it convenient when you're moving things around, it also adds a stronger, more secure connection, and you really need that. It really keeps your wire from bending, from frailing out, losing signal, losing strength, losing power. You want your connection to be tight. It adds longevity to your wire. Over time, some of the threads of copper starts to fall off, and we've all seen it. We start losing little threads of copper on our floor when we're moving speakers, moving speaker wire. But when you have banana plugs, it adds a secure connection to that wire, to your speaker, so you're getting all the power you can possibly get, and you're adding longevity to your speaker wire. Number 4 on our list is going to be bi-wire or single wire. Now really quickly, bi-wiring means you run 2 sets of cables from your amp to your speaker. So you'll have your main one that goes to the highs, and you'll have one that goes to your lows or your mids. And what that does is give each set of speakers its own independent power. So on the back of your speaker, you may have 2 sets of terminals, 2 positive, 2 negatives. And what that allows you to do is to bi-wire your speakers, which is different than bi-amping, but we won't get into that now. Bi-wiring allows you to send its own independent signal to your tweeter and then send its own independent signal to your driver, which is supposed to give you more of a clean, more proper, good sounding system than the traditional bi-wiring, or excuse me, single wire, whenever you have a single thread that bands the two together to give you the sound. It's much more efficient. It's hard to hear, to be honest with you. You're probably not going to hear a difference, but it doesn't hurt to go ahead and run a second wire to your lows or to your highs just to get the best possible quality sound you can get. It's not easy to hear, but it probably helps the speaker more than it helps you. Sending clean power to each speaker instead of kind of daisy chaining it together will help your sound a lot, will help your speakers a lot. Number 3 on our list is, do speaker wires really make a difference? Whether you get a $50 speaker wire or a $12 speaker wire, whether you're getting an 8 gauge or 18 gauge, does it really make a difference? The answer is yes and no. So you don't ever want to go way beyond your limits, your spending limits, and buy a really hefty cable, really expensive cables of any kind, whether it be HDMIs, whether it be RCA cables, whether it be speaker wire. You don't want to go too crazy, but you want to get something good. And here's how you know what's good and what's not. Usually in a home theater, you want to stick with no less than 16 gauge. For your floor standers, for your bookshelves, for your surround sound, for your center, you want to stay with no less than 16 gauge. If you're using a really big space as your media room, your listening room, you want to get as big a gauge of wire as your receiver and speakers and banana plugs can hold, because you want to be able to get all of that current across your room to those speakers, because as electricity travels from your receiver to your speakers, you start to lose your power. So you want to be able to get as much power from point A to point B as you can. You don't want to go too crazy and get super high efficiency, 100% oxygen free monster cables, blah 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 blah. You don't want to go too crazy with that, because there's a certain threshold where you stop hearing a difference and you just pretty much spend money for the looks, for the name brand, things like that. You don't want to get into that. I say for about 16 gauge wire for about 100 feet, about $20 to $25 is a good range. If you're going 12 gauge like I have, I got a 200 foot spool for 12 gauge that completely got all my speakers connected pretty easily. I got that for about 39 bucks. It's oxygen free, it's really good, it's true 12 gauge, really good stuff. Read your reviews. People are always going to review when something's bad. People don't like to get bad things, especially when they order online. They don't want to wait too long, and when they get it, they want it to be correct. Read your reviews. People go out there and they actually measure the gauges themselves. People will tell you if that's true gauge or not. So look at your true gauges. Make sure that you're getting the right gauge for your system. Make sure you're getting the right feet. Always get more than you need, because you never know if you're going to need more. It's always better to have more and store it than to have less and have to order a whole new spool. Sucks. Been there before. So that's a good way to measure if you're getting good quality. You don't need to spend more than 50 bucks on anything like that for your home theater. Speaker wire will be just fine, unless you're getting a big spool, 300, 500 feet, depending about what room you're using. If you're getting 300 feet, 400 feet, 500 foot spools, you need to get 12 gauge or less. Big as you can for your speakers, because you're going to really have to transfer that power from a long distance. It's really going to benefit you that way. Number 2 on this list is going to actually be gauge. A lot of people don't know how speaker wire is measured, so we're going to tell you guys right now in this video. When you hear the word gauge, the bigger the number, as in 18, 20, 22, 24, the bigger the number, the smaller the gauge is. And so the lower the number, the bigger the gauge is. And again, I told you guys, the bigger the gauge means the more power that can transfer from point A to point B. So when you're out there looking for wire, it's going to be dependent on the gauge you're going to need. Is going to be the one that decides what speaker wire you should get. So as far as my system goes, I have all 12 gauge wire for my floor area speakers. So that's my front, left, right, center, and all my surrounds. They're all powered with 12 gauge. My satellite speakers that are powering my Atmos speakers, they're powered with 18 gauge. 2 reasons why I have 18 gauge up there. One, these speakers don't need a lot of power. They're only about 100 watts max, so that 18 gauge is going to be just fine. Also, that 18 gauge is the only type that's gonna fit into my speakers. Anything bigger than that, it's not gonna work. They have the spring terminals, so they're not really gonna be asking for anything else. No banana plug can be plugged into that. 16 gauge may be able to fit. You don't wanna have to cram it and then have some sticking out. You wanna get all your speaker wire in there. So 18 gauge was good. But typically, you're gonna need, on average, 16 to 14 gauge. If you're running a huge system or a powerful system, you may look into 12 gauge. You should not need anything more than 12 gauge whatsoever. Anything other than 12 gauge is overkill. Most banana plugs for home theaters don't even accept that. Most speaker terminals and AV receiver terminals don't accept that. So 12 gauge is a good limit for you. I'm not gonna get anything past 12 gauge. I did hear a small difference when I upgraded my cables. It makes a difference depending on where you're coming from. If you're about the $30 range, $40 range, you're good. Anything higher than $40 or $50, you're paying for the name brand and the way it looks and the material inside of it, but you're not gonna hear a difference. So if you're looking for gauges and you're confused on gauge, the smaller the number, the thicker the gauge. The higher the number, the smaller the gauge. Now, number one on this list is going to be something that's kind of tricky to some people. I know when I first started out with home theater, I was kind of confused on which one I should get. So just in case you're in my shoes where I was back then, I'm going to help you out here. So number one is going to be, what type of speaker wire should you get? And there's two main types, maybe three. You have in-wall speaker wire, you have your normal everyday wire that's wrapped around a spool, and then you have some speaker wire that's fixed at a certain length with banana plugs on either ends. You should probably know which one you want, but just in case you're not sure, I'm gonna help you out with that. Typically the ones that come wrapped in a spool, those are the ones you're gonna want. They're more flexible, they're a little bit thinner as well, so you're able to run that around the baseboard of your wall and maybe tighten them up either with some zip ties or some cable hiders. They're really easy to maneuver with, to string around. They're flexible, they bend around corners pretty well. Some people who run 2-channel stereo, they may want to get the ones that are fixed with a certain length. There's two benefits to that. They come with banana plugs on the end of them, so you don't have to buy any banana plugs. But also, they're the same type of wire and they're the same length. So you can set your speakers equal distant from each other and have the same wire going to both your front, left, and right speaker, so that they're both getting the same amount of power, same sound, everything's exactly the same, so that you're getting that true audiophile quality. And then the other one is in-wall speakers. So if you're going to be putting in-wall speakers, you're going to want in-wall speaker wire specifically made for in-walls. Not going to go into too much detail about why you need it. It's shielded differently. It keeps interference from happening inside the wall. You really need to make sure if you're going to go in-wall to get in-wall speakers. They're shielded differently, they're coated differently, so they're very, very important for that application. But make sure when you're picking all the speaker wire that we talked about throughout these last 6-7 reasons, make sure that you know what type you're going to use, because there's different types. Again, there's your in-wall speaker wire, there's the ones that are fixed in a certain length and they have banana plugs on either end, or you can have the more standard traditional spool speaker wire where you can flex it out, you can bend it, turn it wherever it needs to go, hide it away. And they also come in different colors, so if you're going to be matching it to your wall, if your wall is white, you can get it white. There's some that are paintable, so you can paint the speaker wire once you get it where you have it, so that they blend in with the wall more seamlessly, things like that. So definitely take a look at that. It's super important to make sure you get that right. Alright guys, so that's going to do it for this video. That was 7 things you didn't know about your speaker wire. I hope that it helped you out a little bit, because I know back in the day I used to be super confused about what wire was good. Should I go $75, $25, $17? Which one should I get? So hopefully I've helped you out. If I did help you out, leave me a comment. Definitely hit that like button and push that subscribe button too, so that you're notified for every video that I put up. And we'll see you guys again on the next one. Kpaceguy out.